Good morning. Just checking if the slides are up. Cool. Any joy with the slides? While we're sorting the slides out, my name is Ralph Meyer. I work for a company called Procore Technology Solutions, and today I'm going to be talking about a customer success journey, which is a little bit of a loaded one because there's so many different versions of this journey. And I want to just cite an example that I've been working on and kind of go through a process and a challenge that I faced. But what I'm really interested in is what is that point when my product is doing what it does, okay, and the question then becomes, why do I need a CSM? Because the product's working, it's doing what it's doing. What's my role past that point, right? And everyone's got different answers on that topic. So before I jump into things, let me give you a bit of a purview into what Procore actually does. So a construction software, so imagine if you're running a construction business, what are the things that cost time, money, effort? Well, when you're going to build something, you need a drawing, right? That's kind of the fundamental where you start. But what happens when you've got a drawing, you've got a drawing, you've got a drawing, and they're all different? And then we go and build stuff and it doesn't kind of coordinate, and we start making mistakes. It costs money, time, reworks, all of that type of stuff. And that kind of sucks, let's be honest, right? So what Procore essentially does is it's a platform where this gets centralized and you all have the app and we can load those drawings on there. We can then all have the same drawing, make the same decisions and work from the same song sheet. And what's really cool is you can actually then start to do observations and inspections. So I can see something's not right and I say, hey, you need to go do that thing there for me. And I'll send you a quick message to say, hey, can you rework this quickly? By the way, the drawing is changing. You need to go fix that. By the way, guys, the inspector is coming. We need to make sure our health and safety is all sorted, right? Pretty cool tool, right, for what it does within the industry. Okay. And that's kind of where my story starts. So I started a new job. Now, I'd worked in SaaS for many years. I worked for a company called LinkedIn. I think we all know LinkedIn for their corporate solutions. Went to a company called Tableau. So I worked not only in the HR space, social media, but I also worked in, the BI space. And all of a sudden I found myself in an industry where I had no knowledge of the product, no knowledge of the industry. I didn't know what was important to the industry. If somebody said to me, Ralph, we failed an inspection, it's like, so what? Why is this important, right? And the hard part, and this was the part that I really struggled with, I had absolutely no credibility with my customers, because guess what? All of these guys are hardened construction specialists, right? And they're asking me questions, they expect answers from me. And I kind of looked at them thinking, I have no idea what you're talking about. I genuinely have no idea where I need to be with you, right? How do I take the conversation to something a bit more strategic when I don't even know what matters to you, right? But I can talk about inspections and drawings and stuff. That's not quite where I wanted to be. So I started doing my first few customer meetings. And to put it mildly, this is kind of what I was faced with. By the way, apologies for the Bitmojis. I was working on something and I was like, you know what, just make it simple. But I started working on stuff and my ops reviews felt like a massive reactive mess of stuff just flying at me. Like, Ralph, tell us about the latest product reviews. Tell me about my support tickets. Tell me about what's coming. Tell me about training. And I just looked at these guys thinking, how the hell do you guys operate? This is too much. This is just so much noise. How do I cut through all of this noise? Because genuinely, that's not going to make you money. Customers, that's not going to make you money. It's not going to save you time. It's not going to make you pass your audits. I'm confused. How do we actually become trusted advisors to you? And this is where I started to think, right, how do I do this? As I started doing research, I came across an interesting study from Deloitte. And this is from 2020. And one of the things they were very keen on identifying, it's a study that actually took place in the US. And they surveyed about 300 different IT companies and sort of assessed their vendors, how do they interact with them, and how do they rate them from an advisory point of view, and how do they just get that general sentiment of what that partnership actually looks like. And in that study, they actually cited that 25% of those customers actually saw their vendors as trusted advisors. I knew I wanted to be in the 25%, because chances are my competitors aren't in there. I just didn't know how to do it. I was confused. I couldn't figure out where to start. I mean, where do you start in an industry you've got no knowledge on? You don't really know the product. I had consultants, thankfully, that know their stuff. Thankfully, those guys are so amazing. I just send them in and say, guys, do your speak thing, and they do the speak thing, and I say, right, what do I need to do? Just tell me what I need to do. But that's not good enough. I need to meet with CFOs, CMOs, CEOs, CDOs, CCOs. The whole list goes on. And I need to bring something to the table that makes them money, saves them time. Their margins are so low in the construction industry. Can anybody guess what the margins are in the construction trade? 4%. Every dollar counts, right? So I did what any human being would do. I sat there, I moped, I tried to figure out what to do. Then, of course, I called Harry. This is Harry, by the way. So we actually call him Harry the bar, because he is the bar that we measure ourselves against. Now, a little story about Harry. I used to work at LinkedIn, and I was his successor for a desk. And the desk that we specialized in was called the rock and roll desk. And the reason it was called the rock and roll desk is that we had alcohol clients, tobacco clients, arms dealers, and of course, pharmaceutical companies. So all the trades that people want to work for, those are the ones that we were selling recruitment tools to. And Harry had this amazing ability, and it was a really hard act to follow. He could take that conversation away from that necessary tool piece to one where he started to make every part of the business feel that they had a benefit from this tool somehow. And that's what Harry's skill was. So I called Harry. I was like, Harry, this is my situation. I'm stuck. I can't figure this out. And Harry's like, well, tell me a little bit more. And I was like, I can't prioritize stuff. I can't dissect this. The problems are just flying at me a million miles an hour. So I was like, okay, calm down, Ralph. Break it out into a few pieces. What are those things you can actually control and measure within that account? How can you switch it to an accountability model where you can start to hold your customer accountable for some of these work streams? Because at the moment, they're beating you up. They're holding you accountable to everything. You're on the back foot constantly. You're never front-footing anything. And I was like, you know what, Harry, that's a good shout. So I went away, had to think, and I started to think, right, how do we break this relationship into a few pieces? And then I started to think about previous experiences where, like our ex-CEO at LinkedIn, Jeff Weiner, used to say, trust equals consistency over time. And that was something really important to me because I wanted to be trusted by my customer, but I didn't have credibility. So to build the credibility, I had to deliver, right? That was kind of what I was thinking. So we built something out. This is, if you've ever worked with Tableau, this looks like Blueprint. In fact, it's almost a carbon copy, I'll admit to that. The only difference is the application is a little bit different. And at LinkedIn, we actually use a pyramid of decisions, which is very similar to this, but if you flip this on the side, but anyways, I digress, details. Now, what this actually does is it takes that relationship and breaks it into a few different modules, okay? And what we then thought about, okay, cool, if we can then add certain themes to those, so like the governance and trust, that is delivery. We need to deliver on these items. We need to be able to make sure that if we could square 5 of these away, that's a win, right? But what's really great here is we broke it into elements such as partnership, proficiency, and community. So we knew if the client was not so proficient, we had to concentrate on these different elements here. If they were saying we were a partnership, but we weren't, we knew what we had to work on. We actually broke those out into a few ratings. And don't worry, this is an eye test, I'll break it out in a minute. But we started to rate ourselves under those. Now the hard part with this is, and forgive me, I'm half German, so I was so critical. Like if someone's deployment is not at 100%, they won't score an 80 or 90, they'll score 50 or 0, right? It's that just harsh, right? And the idea around this is that we started to rate those different parts of those solutions. Now, I've got deployment, I've got 3 bits here. There's actually 9 bits to this, right? I don't want to kill you guys with a million tables. But what's really important with this is these were fundamental things that we could identify that were not working in the account. And I knew then, okay, I need to work on those elements. That is what I need to pursue. I need to be able to go to the client and say, hang on, your rollout sucks. Why haven't you done this? I'm confused. You're giving me a hard time, but you've not done the homework. So that's what I was looking for. What are those items that I could bring to them to hold them a little bit accountable to this partnership? Because at the moment, this didn't feel like a partnership. I was just getting beaten up. Ops review after ops review after ops review. So I went back to Harry and was like, Harry, this is what I got. And Harry looked at me, he's like, cool, okay. How are you going to prioritize this? I was like, great, I've got an answer, Harry. So thankfully, guys, I only have about 8 customers, so that's absolute pleasure to only have 8. But I had 2 cited for this. If I had 100 customers, I'd probably only focus on maybe 10. And I wouldn't do all those work streams, I'd maybe focus on 1 or 2 for those. But anyway, so I had this armed. So started going to my ops reviews and to my meetings. And I was like, great, I know what I'm going to do here. I'm going to listen, okay? Who, what, how, what are we talking about? And the first few ops reviews was very much the same, noise coming at me. And then I started asking a few questions around, hang on, how do you report to the board? And we don't report to the board. How come? And they're like, we don't know. I was like, interesting, okay. If you did report to the board, what would you say? We don't know. I was like, interesting, okay. Let's talk education. How do you know your people are trained? Oh, we don't. Oh, interesting. And before long, we started to not only understand their sort of dynamic through those ratings that I mentioned, because I knew they were rubbish at education. They weren't rating their people. They had people going on site. They didn't know if they were qualified or not. I mean, talk about an audit or insurance nightmare, right? So that is where I started to sort of poke around and listen. And those things kept coming at me until I found myself a moment. I found myself a work stream. I found a customer that we were talking, and we were talking about analytics specifically, and we were saying, hey guys, you really need to get a hold of your data. And I'm like, Ralph, we're ahead of you. We hired an analyst. It's like, good for you. You need an analyst, I agree. What is your analyst going to do? Ralph, they're going to build us a dashboard. It's like, that's nice, great. What kind of dashboard? It's going to be the dashboard to master all dashboards. Like, great. How do we contribute to that? What do you mean, what do you contribute to that? I was like, well, I'd like to contribute to that because guess what? I have 1 million dashboards and I could just give them a few ideas. And they're like, awesome. So I met with Anthony. Anthony was one of those analysts. I'm going to be very stereotypical, I apologize. He was so hardcore. I mean, I'm pretty good with Tableau and Power BI. I'm certified, I think I know my stuff. I walked in the room and I was just like, dude, you are just overwhelming me with the amount of information and knowledge you've got. I have to use you. I don't know what you know. And so I completely recognized that skill, that he knew his industry way better than I did, and I was going to leverage this guy. Even though he was my customer, he's starting to work for me. So I said to him, Anthony, here's the deal. Where are we falling short? What do you not see from us that you need to see to make this thing just amazing? And he's like, Ralph, you guys suck at cross-correlating your data. I was like, no, we don't. He's like, yes, you do. I was like, no, we don't. We had an argument. I was like, fine, Anthony, I'll prove we don't. So I went away, I spoke to our analysts, and my analysts were like, you're talking to me? Well, why are you talking to me? We're not customer facing. I was like, guys, not the point. I want to figure out how we solve this problem. So, awesome. I went to our analysts, and they kind of ran us through the program and showed me how they do the cross-correlation. I screenshotted the hell out of this thing. I put confidential stickers over everything just to make sure I don't get sued by my own company. And then I went back to Anthony and said, Anthony, I've got something for you. Check this out. He looked at me and was like, this is amazing, Ralph. I love it. Yes. And then he went away and he built it. By the way, this cost me a couple of meetings, right, just to get this off the ground. And then I challenged Anthony. I said, Anthony, education, you guys suck at recording education. He's like, yes, we do. I was like, great. Let's fix that. Awesome. He got me in touch with the head of D&I, Diversity, Inclusion, and Training. I was like, great. So we had a conversation with them. They started saying, what we want is this. I was like, awesome. What do you have? And we pulled these 2 pools of data together. And all of a sudden, not only are we reporting to the exec board, to all of the program managers, to all of the people on the ground that need the data, we've pulled in education into this as well. So my stakeholder group, I've gone from this angry mob of IT people through to an analyst, through to the board seeing visibility of our data, through to the education guys using our data to cross-correlate to reduce their risks. I'm going to put that down as business value, guys. I'm sorry. Tech, right? And what was really interesting for me, this relationship started to transform, especially when I started going to my next ops review, where I was like, I won't name my customer on this one, but it's like, I'll call him Jim. Hey, Jim, hit me. I'm ready for the negatives. He's like, all right. I hate this. This sucks. I was like, great, Jim, awesome. Board review. This is going to them. Are you happy? And he looked at me as like, how did you do that? What did you do and how did you do it? I was like, mate, Anthony's doing it, that's his gig, that's his baby. He's like, okay, that's fine. It's like, how come your people aren't educated? Now, I'm not just talking Procore education here, right, guys? I'm talking everything, right? All of the types of qualifications for certifications and, site safety and inductions and all that type of stuff. It's all listed there. And he looked at me, he's like, but this is amazing. My people are enabled. I was like, told you, this is how it works. So all of a sudden, the noise started to shrink because Jim started to realize that there's more to this than just filling out the forms and inspections and getting people to use the tool. Because them using the tool was almost a given. Our table stakes here was that the tool was working. The stuff on the side, that's where the real work was, is to make sure that value was realized in every part of their business. And then as a CSM, that was my journey to make sure that that happened. So we had gone through a process of, from a customer's perspective, I'm meeting Procore, I'm going to give them a hard time, to one where I'm going to ask review, hell yes, we want to talk about these big projects and initiatives. I better bring something to the table for Ralph to work on, because otherwise he's going to move on and work on something else. And he'll find his own way to work on something else. And that was a big challenge. So in that same study with Deloitte, they actually cited a really interesting stat, which really just made me feel a bit vindicated and made me feel like I was actually talking the talk. And in that study, they actually identified that if you have your business reviews regularly with your customers and focused on those business value and those business value streams that you were seeking out and actively pursuing, they were 26% more satisfied with your relationship. Now remember, I wanted to be that advisor. That's the sweet spot. It's becoming that advisor through that delivery. And I absolutely loved this article just because it gave me a lot of sort of thoughts around, yes, I'm actually going down the right direction with this. I actually did a bit of deliberation after that, and I said, you know what, let me look at reports from back in the day. So this is one from 2018 by McKinsey. And the reason I looked back in time was to see is this a trajectory that was predicted? Am I just going off piste here? And I'm not an education specialist, I'm not really academic. But what this helped me to vindicate here is that actually the stuff that I was seeing in my industry, that I was seeing as a CSM, were the things that they had predicted. They predicted that the CSM skill needs to change, that we need to have it more as a mantra, as an organization. It can't just be a one-trick pony. Analytics, just so happens my work stream that I landed was an analytics one, just because it's in my comfort zone, but using analytics to figure out where I'm going to be working with the customer on and how to help serve them so that whole organization benefits from my activities. And of course, a unified go-to-market strategy, which I'm going to cover in a second. It was a pretty cool journey, and I must admit, I went to visit them a month ago, and it was one of those moments where we walked in, and you know when you meet your customer for the first time, and you're kind of like, do I shake a hand, do I hug you? And my most difficult customer came over and literally gave me the biggest hug, and I was just like, okay, I'm just going to linger here. Okay, it's inappropriate, let's let go, kind of thing. One of those moments. But it was great, and I didn't tell them at the day, but it was actually my birthday when I went to visit them, right? And they made me feel so welcome. We went for dinner afterwards. They sat in this restaurant, sang me happy birthday, put a flag on my desk, and embarrassed the hell out of me, and I felt so good. But if I rewind 8 months ago, I was getting beaten up constantly, right? And that was the shift that happened here. And I'm pretty sure next year, this is going to be even better because we're going to find other cool stuff to work on. Which brings me to my next section here. So, once we had achieved this partner status, I thought, you know what? I always like to push the boat out a little bit and ask for a little bit more. And I can't help myself, genuinely. So during our last QBR, poor Richard, who joined me in the meeting, was sitting there. I love stitching Richard up, by the way. It's a bit of a thing we've got going on. And I said to the customers, hey, so we're working with the education department, we're doing this, we're doing analytics. Hey, we're going to work with finance soon. That's going to be awesome because then we could put cost to all activities. Can you imagine if I could tell you how much your PMs cost per day when they make a mistake? Oh yeah, we could do that. That would be cool. And they looked at me, it's like, Ralph, that's like Big Brother. And I was like, hey, come on, why not? But we could do something with that, right? Yes, we could. So we're going to focus on something along those lines. But the big one, I said to them, so, explain to me why your supply chain is not on your tool. And there's about 3,000 people in the supply chain. I said, Ralph, why would they be? It's like, why wouldn't they be? You have this massive construction yards. You're sending materials over to them. It lands. The project manager says, I don't need this here, I need it at site B. And by the way, these guys have thousands of sites, so it's not just a matter of moving it, it's a matter of shifting it. I was like, wouldn't it be great if it just landed in the right place the first time, and they were communicating with each other? And he was like, oh yeah, that would be a good idea. I was like, no ways. And so also, after this stuff is done, you guys do a handover to your customers, right? It's like, yeah. I was like, shouldn't they get onto Procore? Because then instead of you having to take all this documentation, dumping it onto their system, they could just access it in your system and query things there and then, and hold the right people accountable, and check that all of the audits were done properly, and do all the due diligence, and get the insurance, and get all of this cool stuff, and save them a ton of time. They don't need lawyers and all these people to do that work. They can just do it in one shot. He looked at me and was like, yeah. My sales partner looked at it and said, geez, okay. Starts invoicing, honestly, he's writing the invoice as we go along. And so much so, we walked away from that meeting, then all of a sudden, this tiny little moment where we just focused on inspections and drawings and things has grown into something where we're starting to look at the company and say, we can help you solve some of those big challenges. We can save you time, money, effort, make people's lives faster. Do you guys know the 5-minute rule? If it takes longer than 5 minutes to do, you'll get distracted. You'll go to the next tab and work on the next thing. It happens to me every single day. That's what the method is that we employed here. If you can't get on the app, if it takes longer than 5 minutes, they won't do it. Let's be honest. We're busy. We don't have time. So how do we save that? So my message to you guys today, for the ICs out there, ICs, I mean anybody who's customer-facing, in the trenches, doing what they're doing, trying to make a difference. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. I think we mentioned this yesterday. All of those topics that I mentioned today are not my areas of specialties. But what I did do, I pursued them and found people that knew something about those. And that was what was for me so important, is to get the right people in the room and say, hey, let's talk finance. I know nothing about finance, by the way. I suck at it. But I do know a few people that are really good at finance. So let me bring them in the room. Even if they're not customer facing, I'll just manage that a little bit. Wear your commercial hat. And what I mean by your commercial hat is, you know that example that I've just said to you? How likely do you think that's going to churn? Question for you. And how do you put that to RFP? Can you imagine putting an RFP out to another vendor and say, hey, so we want you to come in, and we want you to deal with analytics, HR, finance, and this, and you need to be a construction platform? And they're like, no, I'm a construction platform. I don't do none of those things. I'm going to bet it's quite unlikely to churn, right? But also what it means is that partnership element, I feel so good with these guys. I genuinely enjoy meeting with them. Even though they beat me up still every now and then, it's okay. I beat them up again as well, so it's a mutual thing. For our leaders, so what is my menu of activities? Can I let my CSM run like hell with this thing? Or am I going to block them? Am I going to say, hey, here's a playbook. Follow the playbook. Because I don't know about you guys, but when I get a playbook, I'll read it and I was like, no chance, I'm not doing that. Absolutely not. Because it doesn't come across as being genuine. It doesn't reflect my scenario perfectly. It's like when somebody goes through training and they just tried that new piece of training. So like, let's say if you're having a one-to-one and someone said, oh, I learned how to influence people. I'm going to try it in my next one-to-one with Ralph. You're like, please don't. Just don't do it. And last one, of course, embrace the fact that table stakes is that the tool's working. That is your table stakes. Where a CSM adds that value is that extra stuff, that extra frosting. Find out what that is. What is it in your industry? How can you take this thing and not make it your silo, make it and pull in different parts of the business to feel the benefit of that tool. So ladies and gentlemen, I've got 6 minutes and 30 seconds available to me. If there are any questions, I'll take a few questions, but I want to thank you for your time and appreciate it. Thank you. Oh, no questions. This is good. I got off really lightly. Hey, how's it going? Make it an easy one, please. It's still early in the morning. I've had one cup of coffee.
I'll try. I really liked what you said about kind of finding different stakeholders and different teams who could have a sort of, I guess, a stake in Procore. We've got a similar thing where we work with a single team, and often we think about becoming multi-threaded within that team and getting a decision maker, a user, a champion, that sort of thing. But we don't think kind of laterally outside of that team and how we can bring other teams in the organization in to have a stake,
Yeah.
Which obviously helps with retention and things like that. How do you suggest you actually navigate an organization and get those introductions that you need?
Yeah, so I've actually got a similar scenario where I've got this bunch of stakeholders, they're actually blockers. They've become blockers where I can't actually progress stuff. And so I started, and it's something that, it's going to sound terrible. I started to sort of ask them questions, not inappropriate questions, but questions that are way out of their scope. And I was like asking them, hey guys, all my customers, I work with the finance teams. When can I work with your finance team? And I almost assume the sale. And they're like, why would you work with finance? It's like, well, we do the costings. Why don't you guys do that? And so I almost assume that role of saying, we do this with other customers, and you're not feeling the benefit of this. I'm confused why you wouldn't want it. But you tell me why you don't want it. And if they're like, well, we kind of do. And I was like, okay, go introduce me. I need your blessing. I could try and go behind their back. Yeah, that's not going to end well. Yeah, it never does. So I try and get those blessings, but yeah, blockers are terrible. So if I had 100 accounts and I had 10 and I had a blocker on one, I'd move my attention to another one completely because I want to secure the revenue in this one. I want to make sure that's rock solid. And the most efficient way for me to do that is what I seek out. Yeah, I want to save everybody completely. Can I? No. So I try and divvy my time up with who's willing to work with me in this fashion. And what's really cool, and this is a very naughty strategy. As soon as I've done that, I'll say, hey, I'm working with the guys on this. You guys should talk. And then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, we work with Procore. We're doing all this cool stuff. And that client's like, we should be doing that. And you're like, so they do the selling for me. I suck at sales, by the way. I'm really bad at it, genuinely, guys. And so I always ask people to do the sell for me. And that's my strategy. So it's not a foolproof method, but that's what I employ. So, yeah.
Hey, good morning. Really
Morning.
nice presentation. Thank you.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you.
I wanted to understand, while you are to become the trusted advisor, consistency and delivering, building the trust, sometimes that can be quick, but sometimes it can also take time.
Yeah.
How do you, from an internal stakeholder management to your direct management and others, give that confidence that you're in the right path and you're not going inside a hole, right? And at the end of the year, you don't deliver the value, the revenue, the key matrices that we're talking about.
Cat, close your ears. My colleague Cat. So, do you want the official version or the underhand version? Okay, official version. So the official version is, I just run like hell and I just ask people questions, like in my business, if they're client facing or not, I just run at them and say, hey man, you do the analytics, like Tableau dashboard, if your name's on it, I'm going to talk to you, say, how did you do this, etc. So I kind of assume the sale on that. But what is very important, and this is something I try and make sure I kind of, when I do have this conversation with people, is to say, hey man, I've got this idea, I want to do this, but I want to make sure there's something in it for you. What do you want out of this? Do you want street cred? Do you want to tell me, do you want me to tell your boss you're amazing? If you've got a review coming up, I'll tell you you're amazing. So that I get that sort of buy-in internally, because without it, it's a currency I can't count on. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, all right? Sometimes people are like, no, not interested. But as soon as someone says no, I'll go to the next person. And you know, old sales technology, old salesperson, where you just like take the no, move on. And look, quite often I'll find the business isn't ready for some of the elements that I want to work on. And that sucks, okay? Because that means I'm stuck. But what, at that point, when I'm having my review with Richard or anybody involved, I say, Rich, I really want to work on this, but I don't have the resource. And he's like, oh, I'm not giving you people. I say, no, I don't want a human. I want access. Can you give me the access? That's all I want. I want you to say, speak to so-and-so, and so-and-so needs to know that the authority is behind it. And that's all I'm asking for. So I try and work that element of it. Does that answer your question? Because it's really hard if you have this really awesome idea that no one's doing in your business. I find it very difficult to explain it. To then get to explain it to millions of people and no one does anything with it, I prefer to just grab it and run with it and make stuff happen. And if it's not happening, sometimes I just kill it off. Because then I know it's too difficult, I'll move to the next thing. It's choose your challenges, right? So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. Cool, I've got a minute left, so if there's one more question, no, otherwise I'm got off the hook.
Over there.
Oh, wicked. I'll try and be concise with my answer. I talk a lot, I apologize.
I really appreciate everything you've gone through there. So my name's Tracy, I work for Thrive. I'm new to leadership within the CS function, and everything you described there is exactly what we would want to achieve. How do you prioritize that and help your team to kind of not feel overwhelmed?
Yeah. So I'm not a manager. I don't manage a team. I do lots of one-to-ones and mentoring, and I used to lead I'm not a manager, but I used to lead a team of 30. And one of the things I kept asking all of my colleagues is like, cool, what are you working on? Tell me about your customers. Okay, great. What do you want for you? Do you want to become that trusted advisor? Yeah, I do. I was like, great, okay. How? What do you want to focus on? How are you going to uplift that conversation with your customer? And they're like, well, I don't know. I'm not sure. And it's like, okay, tell me about your clients. Who's your favorite client? Can you ask them those really weird questions about, can we work on this? And if the answer is no, you're like, okay, so we need to work on the relationship. If the answer is yes, like, great, what are you going to ask them? And so I would sort of ask them, put yourself out of that comfort zone. And I wouldn't challenge them and force them to do it, absolutely not. But I would ask, say, look, if you want to grow as that CSM, if you want to be that trusted advisor, you're going to have to learn how to do it. And the way you learn is by doing. And so I would always challenge them and say, right, so what part do you want to talk to them about? Let's get you prepped. Let's get your narrative straight. What are you going to say? How are you going to say it? And I can help you with that. But I'm not going to do it for you in the meeting, if that makes sense. And sort of just arm them with that. I don't know if that's the right approach, but I've seen CSMs then do amazing things with great brands where they all of a sudden start to challenge them. Once they've done it the first time, they can do it again and again and again. And before you know it, they're just excellent. And then they move on to other clients and stuff. So that's my approach, but yeah, I would just take it like that. So thank you for the question. Awesome. Excellent. Other than that, I think I'm done. Thank you so much.